Hi everyone, my name is Stacey and I'm an occupational therapist. Today I'm talking about a project that I completed while I was working with the Acquired Brain Injury Transitional Rehab Service in Brisbane. First, I just want to acknowledge the team members who helped me work on this project and also the Bright Sparks funding through the Hopkins Centre, which helped to fund some of this project. So the project was on return to driving in the community after acquired brain injury, and I'll start with a little bit of background about, as a clinician, what I was seeing and how this turned into a research question. So ABITRS helps clients who are in their first 10 weeks of rehab in the community after they've been discharged from inpatient rehab, the hospital, and return to driving is a very common goal for these clients, and I was noticing they really perceive it to be an indicator of good recovery and a facilitator of community engagement and return to work. So we were seeing a lot of comments about things like, well, I'll do that again when I'm driving. So people at ABITRS are in a period of driving disruption. This means they often don't have that they often haven't finished that medically mandated period of time where they're unable to drive after their acquired brain injury. And sometimes after a moderate to severe brain injury, they may still be presenting with deficits after that period of time, which may prevent them from return to driving. So for this reason, after brain injury, people require medical clearance to return to driving. And for each individual, that length of time is not always clear. It can be a highly individualized and complex process. So what we were seeing as clinicians is that return to driving interventions that were existing weren't quite meeting the needs of people who hadn't permanently ceased driving and were hoping to get back to driving. Some of the written education really focused on those medical restrictions. They lacked relevance in how to link it with your other therapy activities, and the clients were having poor understanding, and they weren't using that driving time disruption productively. As I said earlier, this was leading to frustration for the clients and clinicians. So this led to a quality improvement activity within the workplace where we looked at creating a workbook or a resource that was relevant to return to driving in ABITRS. We were aiming to provide more detailed and individualised education for clients who, as I said, had not medically been cleared to drive, though had not permanently ceased driving yet either. We wanted to support clients to maintain that participation in community activities or other therapy activities during that period of driving disruption, and clearly demonstrate to them how their other therapies are supporting them with that goal of returning to drive. So I actually spent quite a bit of time discussing what I was seeing clinically with my supervisors and learning about what research options were out there, and that's how I learned about a scoping review, which seemed quite appealing as it allowed you to investigate all that grey literature and other styles of literature out there. And it led to this research question, which was to identify the currently used interventions implemented during driving disruption that support the goal of return to driving after ABI, and identify the evidence base for these. So 4 databases were used, as well as hand searching of the references, and this Prisma table here shows the process of screening that we went through, and in the end we had 31 articles that met eligibility. So I'll go through now briefly the results, and apologies to anyone who's heard it already. There were 7 driver rehabilitation interventions that were identified. So with on-road lessons, there appears to be promising evidence, but there remains a lack of conclusive evidence through your definitive RCTs. And with simulator training, evidence indicates it may be suitable in the stroke population, but despite this, there still appears to be a lack of translation into practice with these results. So considerations such as access to resources, the funding required for it, and the clinician training are likely contributing to the limited use of these 2 interventions. Assistive technology and modifications includes those advanced driving systems designed at a manufacturer's level, and that could be something like your lane control sensors, but it also involves using a piece of technology, say a video camera, to develop a specific driving skill. So evidence for this is improving driving performance remains unclear with no definitive literature, But there may be some promising evidence for the use of AT in targeting self-awareness of driving skills and how that insight can support the adjustment to driving cessation for those who need to. So skill component training were those off-road interventions aimed at retraining the underlying skills to driving. They're provided in a range of more clinically feasible platforms such as your iPad games, your pen and paper puzzles, and strengthening exercises. And these were often used as the control group in studies representing what our usual care practices are. So evidence was not conclusive, with varying reports on effectiveness when compared to other interventions. So community-based functional retraining were activities aimed to remediate driving skill deficits during a community outing, such as navigating public transport. So this appeared in greater literature, such as a service description, and it indicates there's a bit of a practice to evidence gap. These interventions often highlight that driving the vehicle is only one component of being an independent driver. So, other examples were including getting in and out of a car while holding an umbrella or filling up the car with petrol. Emotional adjustment was explored in qualitative studies, and they highlighted that during driving interventions should also address ways to maintain community engagement and manage the frustrations experienced while not driving. And this might include training an individual to use a bus or taxi or walking when they're not driving. And driver education had 4 themes that were referenced, and that was the timing post-injury, best to deliver the education, the delivery method used, understanding that purpose of the education. Is it about informing of return to driving processes, or is it about helping to implement strategies to manage frustrations? And at last, the health professionals and services needing necessary skills and knowledge to deliver the education. So driving behaviour models were also frequently referenced within the literature, and Mycon's hierarchical model of behind-the-wheel behaviour being the most used. Models such as this one highlight the complex demands of driving, starting at the bottom with the most basic operational skills such as pushing the pedals, and then building on that with tactical skills where you start integrating those into a more dynamic environment, and then most importantly needing those strategical executive skills necessary to make judgments while driving, and some of those might even be before getting in the vehicle, such as altering your driving plans based on the weather conditions. So I'll talk a little bit now about how we use those results to reflect upon and make changes in our clinical practice. So the first thing we did was summarize these to discuss, well, what's working well and what could we be changing with the workbook that we created as part of our quality project, which actually, kick-started this in the beginning. And what we found, in general, that we were on the right track with the workbook. It allows that personalised education, and it's also left with the client so that the rest of the MDT can then open it up and look at it and be consistent in the education that's provided, and that we were addressing, alternate modes of transport that can be used during driving disruption. So we're on the right track. We also needed to give suggestions and look at the processes to upskill the OTs as they come into department to make sure that that necessary knowledge is there to be the specialists in delivering that education. There were a few things that we could look at considering more about, like introducing photo or video footage of safe versus unsafe driving to, have a range of modes of education to help people with understanding and interpreting that. We could also look at including some education on those driver behaviour models to help demonstrate to clients why we're starting with those more basic foundation skills and how they build, and how you also need those executive functioning skills to be able to operate a vehicle. And, we often get questions, so maybe there could be on the handouts some frequently asked questions sort of section about, there's a simulator on the Gold Coast, or are go-karts a good option, and being able to provide that education to clients on these topics as they arise. And I'm just enjoying also in educating and informing a range of clinicians with the results that we found, and sharing the results to help people reflect upon their own clinical practice and see what changes they might need to make in their practice. So if anyone has any questions, either about return to driving or about that process of your experienced clinician but novice researcher and wanting to know, well, how can we translate things into practice, I'm happy to be involved in any discussions. Best way of contacting me is through my email that's there on the screen. Thank you everyone for your time.